So, I could not really wrap my head around this, but it's been a long time since the Spider-Man film franchise started. But even though it keeps, there always seems to be a fear of doing the same thing as the previous version. Despite that, one thing that all these Spider-Man movies have in common is that they all have, they all make good use of Spider-Man's famous comic book villains. Besides Batman, Spider-Man probably has the most famous villains in all of comic book history. So when you look at Vulture in Homecoming, they kind of reframed him into this tragic character, this tragic figure who was somewhat relatable. He just needed to live and pay his bills, support his family, etc. And the one constant through all of those Spider-Man movies, despite on who was in charge of those, is that they're all kind of tragic, somewhat sympathetic, and relatable characters. So I've gathered us here today to kind of track how villains have been depicted through those movies. And I thought it would be appropriate if, before talking about Vulture specifically, we talk about all the pre-MCU Spider-Man villains. So, welcome to episode 28 of AP Marvel. I'm Chris Compendio. I'm here with Izzy Cho.
Hi.
I'm here with Anthony, who's feeling great today.
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm doing good.
And Thomas Lockney is our guest
Hello,
today.
everybody. Hi, I'm the guest.
Yeah, I embarrassingly asked you how to pronounce your last name right before this, and because it was a doozy, let's say. But Thomas,
it's quite all right.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what you do. Who are you?
Hi, my name is Thomas Lockney. I currently work at a video game translation firm as a English editor. But I also help co-run the Major Casts podcast network, and I have several projects on that.
Cool. You are the game dude.
Yes, I'm the game dude on Twitter.
Because you are the one and only game dude, apparently.
The eponymous game dude.
Yes, as made famous by insert
there's
title of game later. I don't know.
Actually, yeah. That name comes from. There's a really cool Los Angeles game store, used and new, called just called Game Dude. It's in North Hollywood, and it's a really incredible store. If anyone listening has the opportunity to go there, I would highly recommend it. They've got like all this old paraphernalia from like the 90s. There's like Doom cutouts.
Oh, the 90s. Oh, so old.
They have all sorts of like old game, like original copies of old games and such. It's a really well run store, and it's really...
That's awesome.
Only 90s kids get this. Anywho, Spider-Man, the Spider Dude, let's call him. Have you all seen all of the? I guess it's been 6 Spider-Man movies. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. How much do you guys remember the first Spider-Man movie, directed by Sam Raimi in 2002?
Pretty well, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That one...
You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us.
Yeah, a very significant post 9/11
moment.
American film.
Yeah.
Yes.
It had the banned removed trailer of some sort of, I don't know if it was like a bank robbery or a terrorist attack or something like that, but he escaped in a helicopter, and Spider-Man traps them by webbing them up between the Twin Towers, which would not work in that context anymore after all that. So, that was not a scene that was from the movie. I guess that was his little teaser, being like, hey, Spider-Man's here. Turns out the real bad guy was Willem Dafoe's Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin. Any Willem Dafoe fans here?
Oh, you know
I am a scientist myself.
Ride or die.
Yeah. He's always that actor who, like, I always just want to see him in a screaming monologue and just going crazy and unhinged.
The last movie he was in, was he screaming in that one?
I don't know which one was that.
The one he was nominated for last year?
Oh, was that the Florida Project?
Yeah, the one that was
God
10 years ago.
Damn it!
2017.
Yes, 10 years ago in 2017. I have not seen the Florida Project. I think it's on Amazon Prime or something like that, but I might check that out.
Oh, okay, because that was the only movie that I thought that I'd seen Willem Dafoe in since Spider-Man 1.
No, he's in Death Note as Ryuk, and he actually is legitimately like that is a I can't say I dislike that movie because I think it's like really
There is
weird and
as
interesting,
I've
but-
mentioned before on this podcast, I watch a lot of YouTubers. There's going to be a video at some point by a guy by the name of H Bomber Guy who will be saying why Death Note, the live action remake, will be reviewing it. I forget if he says if it's good or not because everyone says it's bad. But
it's interesting. I definitely can't say that it's like good.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and he's in John Wick. Fucking of course. Oh, and
he's
in The Fault in Our Stars as the author that they don't like.
As the author, yeah.
Oh, I don't see that. I didn't see that movie.
I've seen both these movies, and I don't remember him in them.
I didn't remember Willem Dafoe until you mentioned that he was the author, and I'm like, yeah, that's
I remembered
right.
how he was John Wick's friend in John Wick 1.
Yeah, his like dad figure.
Oh man,
Not really his dad figure. I would say more of just a friend who's an assassin with
I
him.
think he has the same role in Aquaman that's coming soon to theaters.
Yeah.
Not sponsored by DC or WB.
Yes, a Marvel podcast being sponsored by DC, a concept.
Yeah, that'll be a level of irony, wouldn't it? What do you remember about Willem Dafoe in Spider-Man?
He was
in parentheses 2002.
Because of that movie, I've always seen Willem Dafoe as very creepy. But I don't know if it's because of that movie that I think he's creepy, or that society has always deemed him as creepy prior to that.
I think the mirror scenes, like when he's like after like
they were
Green
so
Goblin
creepy.
stuff, that I was like, oh wow, like that's weird, that's creepy. Maybe I think it probably started with that.
Yeah. As far as like the tragic sympathetic villain angle, I think that this is of all the villains in these movies, like this is the closest one to just like outright, this guy's not like what happens to him, like text on page, like, oh, a guy loses his mind because he's so driven is tragic, but like what he does is like sell weapons to the military and then like just, I mean, like he kills a bunch of people and stuff. He is probably the least sympathetic of all of these figures, and like I think that's why Willem Dafoe is great casting, because he's just got that hungry smile. He's got
that way that you said hungry smile was very, very hungry smile.
Yes.
He's got it.
Oh, he was in Speed 2.
Yeah.
And he was in the Boondock Saints and American
2.
Psycho.
Oh yes,
Antichrist. He's
yeah.
prolific. Yeah.
Well, I know he's
Yeah.
prolific, but I'm trying to see if people thought he was creepy before. And by the way, that he played Jesus one time, The Last Temptation.
Last Temptation. Yeah.
Are
Are you trying to track like chronologically, like when he was first considered?
when
to be
was he creepy?
Like,
When was he considered creepy? He was
Hey,
in Streets
Siri.
of Fire. I think maybe Streets of Fire. He was probably the bad guy in Streets of Fire.
So wait, Thomas, you have to remind me. Like, I forgot about that whole angle. Like, what was his Because I remember him being like the head of some sort of corporation. I remember
of
he was
Oscorp?
kind of of Oscorp. He was like kind of a father figure to Peter Parker, ironically more than for Harry Osborn, which was kind of a
Weird.
point of contention.
Yeah.
But what was he actually developing in that movie that like led him to go crazy?
Because there's that incredible line, like, we go back to formula. I believe it is just a straight up super soldier serum.
Right.
Because that's their thing, is they want, like, they don't just want weapons, they want people who are really good at using them. Then like that's how he becomes the Green Goblin, as he takes it. Because then there's that's how he becomes like manic and evil, is that the serum is unstable or whatever, and so he's denied human testing and then decides to use it on himself, and that's how he becomes the Green Goblin.
I remember when they redid this exact same concept in a more recent film called Venom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of Venom, and we're gonna talk about this with Doc Ock, but like, there's the whole, Izzy mentioned like the mirror, and there's always like this kind of dual personality thing that they try to do with these movies. I'm wondering what you guys think about that depiction of, oh, maybe the villain part of them is just like another like entity that's
separate,
tangent to them, or separate, or however you would interpret that.
Because I think you always want to try to see like the good in people, and like there's like a good side to someone, like a bad side to someone. So I think they try to make like a distinction between that. Like people are layered. Like people are not black and white. Like they're gray. So maybe that's what they were trying to do with that, if that makes sense. Because so I'm looking at like the notes that we have for today, and one thing that I remember, like one thing that really stood out to me was that I think it's at the end when like Peter defeats Willem Dafoe, and he tells Peter like, don't tell Harry that I was the Green Goblin. And so after James Franco walks in like to Peter, like standing over his dead father, and he's realizing, oh, you killed him. It's like a huge source of guilt for Peter, because it's like, well, I can't tell you that your dad was a monster. And it's that moment when he's like, don't tell Peter, that like almost makes him realize, like, he's realizing, oh, like I fucked up, like I was a bad person. And it's like even in like death, like they see the morality in that.
Yeah. So one of the things I was thinking of was that in the Sam Raimi movies, each of the movies has one of the villains have that mirror scene. In Spider-Man 2, you don't really have a mirror scene, but you have a scene where Octavius looks at the arms and is like doing like saying one line, like the bad side of him, and then saying a side that's like the good side of him. So it's like there's more. It's interesting because there is gray area in it, but it's not necessarily the what's being discussed is gray area. Does that make sense? Like it's like the angel and the devil on the shoulders.
Like to talk, like to show that you're gray, you show like black and white.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, you show the black and the white, and then the individual is gray because you have white. You have the good and the bad sides, but that doesn't necessarily make the actions that you do gray. Whereas when we look to, like we'll get to it more, but like when you get to Homecoming, the actions are driven for, like, oh, they could be good or bad purposes. Whereas when you have Green Goblin, his actions were just, I'm crazy, Willem Dafoe yelling at things, decide between the girl you love or the children.
Thomas, any thoughts on the
Yeah.
Really? Because I was just
That's actually an uncanny impression, but yeah. Thomas, any thoughts on the Goleming that we're talking about over here?
This is such a early 2000s movie, and
yes,
I think
yes, it is.
Specifically in like the fact that they are positioning Willem Dafoe, the CEO of a weapons manufacturer and distributor, as somebody whose soul can be like fought for and won, because that is very much what the character of Spider-Man is about. Is like this is like very common amongst heroes, is like he is constantly in a battle with his like own soul, where he did the wrong thing one time and things broke bad for him, and so now he has to like he tries to live in that gray zone of vigilantism because of his great power, great responsibility.
Yes.
Versus like, Willem. The only reason that Willem Dafoe can be viewed in that lens at that time is because like you said, this is a post 9/11 film. Everybody's kind of like, ooh rah rah, let's go to war, and so somebody who is the CEO of a weapons manufacturer in that era can be viewed, and like even persisting into the MCU, like Tony Stark is still like at the end of the day he like makes weapons, he builds weapons, that's what he does, even if he kind of like
he gives them to the good guys
after that. Yeah,
but we don't know what
the good guys,
the Avengers, like the non-shield non-superpowered adventured worker people are doing. Like, are they going to, like, I don't know, like Middle Eastern countries and causing coups? Are they giving weapons to people? Like, what are they doing? What are the non-superheroes doing? At like the people that worked there that we saw like running around at the end of Age of Ultron. Like, what are those people doing? And I don't think it's like just hanging out, pretending to act like soldiers.
Yeah. So that I think is kind of my read on Willem Dafoe is like there is like a battle for his soul going on, but it's more about whether or not he's like a systemic institutional murderer or his own kind of rogue vigilante. And I think that like that is a very interesting cultural product of the time, where like that is what we consider to be a character who can be viewed sympathetically despite their like their fall, as it were.
Yeah. And I guess the way they try to have that personal connection is that Peter Parker looks up to this man, so that's that, like, having that sort of personal thing, and they kind of continue that with Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, like
way more with Doc Ock than with
Spider-Man 3.
Harry. I mean, not Harry, Norman
Osborn. Norman Osborn being like a very I feel like other interpretations of him, and we're not going to like talk about the PS4 game for hours and hours now.
I was actually going to bring up the PS4 game.
He's like a politician.
He's the father. But like even before all that, he was the father of Peter's friend. Mm-hmm. So like, try to think of like if you're really like your best friend who's like father's like super cool. If you're hanging out with the kid, you'll also be hanging out with the father. So you'll have like a semi like decent relationship with the father,
right? Yeah.
So like seeing Norman Osborn at like Peter's high school was like, oh, that's cool, just hanging out with all of us, you're coming to pick up Harry from school or something. So it just seems more like casual in that way. Where with Octavius, it was like we both have the same pursuits, and it's way more. What happened? The relationship in Spider-Man 2 is very similar to what actually happens in the PS4 game, where they're actually friends. They work together, and their pursuit and their strive for knowledge and science is what drives their friendship. And then the accident happens, and then
they added a wife for Doc Ock.
Yeah, they added a wife and
Mrs. Ock. Let's call her
Mrs. Ock. Yeah, I just
Olivia.
Still
Oh, sorry.
Why isn't her name Olivia?
It has to be a 3-syllable name that it's either a 3-syllable or a 2-syllable name that the villain or the hero can say in their direst like moment, like this is for you, Olivia, or this is for you, Martha, or like some other generic white name that signifies that you died now, and I am sacrificing myself for you.
Let me correct myself. It's Rosalie. Rosalie Octavius.
Same thing. Same thing. Literally.
Wait, let me do the counts.
See, it fits.
Let me check your math there. Yeah.
That I think they. I think that Spider-Man, and what really like when we finally arrive at Homecoming, I think that like Spider-Man works best when he is put up against a like, let's call it a populist villain, because Doc Ock is like, he's a professor. He doesn't have a lot of money. He's working on grants. He's trying to he's trying to do good in the world. Unlike, like that's the thing that I think really separates him from Norman Osborn is that Doc Ock genuinely is trying to like be beneficial. Mm-hmm. He's trying to like solve the energy crisis.
Yeah.
And then like they do the thing that like lots of writers do, because the only way that they know how to write human conflict is to give somebody a wife and then kill them.
Jesus.
Yeah. Fridging.
That is a very exactly, and that is like a very I think
classic fridging.
Call it populist storytelling trope, like not in like the positive way of populism.
It's putting someone in. It's fridging someone.
Yeah.
It's trying to humanize them through the fridging, which is a lot, which like the idea being that is a relatable thing, the loss of a loved one, more so than like, oh, I can't have my super soldier serum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily praising that
of
decision,
course,
but like that's what they're doing, and I think that like that's part of why Doc Ock does tonally feel a little more better paired with Peter Parker. Is he's like much more human.
But you bring up an interesting turn of phrase where you say like populist villains, where it's like, yeah, it makes sense that all of Spider-Man's villains are populist villains because he's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Exactly.
It's people that are he's going to be interacting and fighting against villains that, although are caricatures of and dress up in silly outfits versions of real people that you will meet in your neighborhood. People that, want power, people that strive for trying to do what's good, but is it good for some people, or is it good for everyone, or is it will it put people in harm's way and stuff like that?
Yeah, let's see what happens when I make a mini sun with my giant metal arms.
People that are damaged by a system, and that system also affects other people in reality, like our real life. What is that? How does a fictional superhero come to grips with not only how it affects their reality, but our reality? So, I'm drawing stuff from like the comics and stuff, but like if you look at one of my favorite super villains of Spider-Man is Mysterio, because he's a shamed pyrotechnics and special effects artist, and it's like he's just a guy. He just knows how to do shit well. He just knows how to make like parlor tricks and sometimes uses hallucinogenic drugs to convince Peter that he's like in like this fantasy world, and it's like that's not crazy. I mean, it is crazy, but you know what I mean.
I really want to see how they MCU that.
Yes,
yeah.
I agree. I think it will be cool.
So what you're talking about, these villains being like affected by systemic issues and problems. So when you talk about the Sandman in Spider-Man 3, his whole spiel is that he's turned to a life of crime because he's trying to provide for his daughter, who has, I don't remember what illness she has, but it's pretty serious, and I guess it's to cover healthcare costs is why he's doing all that.
Mm-hmm.
Plus you have the personal element of like, oh, apparently this is the real dude that killed your Uncle Ben, not that other guy. So, kind of a...
It was the government that turned him into the Sandman, so the government's bad.
With the particle accelerator?
I don't know how that works. I don't know how... I honestly, that Spider-Man 3 was a mess.
Yeah, because you have like kind of villains almost competing each other to I don't know, take control of like whatever thematically this movie's about. So by the end you're like, wait, what was that movie about?
Yeah.
Topher Grace was Venom, remember that?
Yeah, I've been trying to think of a
Let's
good...
talk about that 70s show Venom.
Spider-Man! Give me more pictures of Spider-Man!
That was a bad J.K. Simmons.
It wasn't bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad, J.J.
Topher Grace. Someone talk about Topher Grace.
So I've been...
I don't remember his role.
Oh, so no, it was just going to be something stupid. I haven't watched Spider-Man 3, but I've been trying to think of a good Tom Holland as Rihanna as Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 3 joke all day, and I can't think of it.
Hold on. Topher Grace. Topher Grace is a bad choice for Eddie Brock because Topher Grace is like small and puny and not threatening or mean or any sort of anti-hero that Venom is supposed to be, and I don't even know what was his downfall. Like, was it that he got fired?
He got fired and
like a disgraced photographer.
He apparently stole his girl. I don't know.
He stole his girl. Who was his girl?
Apparently Bryce Dallas Howard's Gwen Stacy, but like they weren't.
Wait a minute. Hold the fucking phone.
Yes.
I thought that the Gwen Stacy character was just some random actress. Oh my god, it was Bryce Dallas Howard. I just realized.
Anthony, I haven't even watched the movie, and I know this.
Yeah, but still, I mean, the only thing that I know her from is Jurassic World.
And being Ron Howard's daughter.
She was also. She was also in The Help.
Yes.
I never saw The Help.
A lot of Shyamalan movies too. She was the lady in the water.
Oh my god. Oh man. I've seen that movie a lot because it's my mom's favorite.
That's a weird favorite movie, Mom. Mom, you gotta find other movies. There's other better movies than Lady in the Water by M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah.
She's a person of very specific taste.
Must be a big Paul Giamatti fan then.
Anthony, you mentioned a good point about like how Topher Grace is not meant to play Eddie Brock, because like as I mentioned, I haven't watched Spider-Man 3, but my first exposure, I don't think I should.
Not at all.
But my first exposure to Venom as a kid was that he was just like the anti-Spider-Man, and like Venom was like built to be like it was essentially Spider-Man in a black suit, and that's what I seen. That's what it looked like. But then you just look at Venom, and like he's big and hulking, and he looks so much more like the comics than Spider-Man 3 makes Venom out to be. And I thought that was really interesting direction that I guess they decided to go with.
And why he's got a tongue all of a sudden?
Yeah, like see the thing is that Topher Grace dies. Eddie Brock dies at the end of.
Topher Grace is still alive.
So I'm gonna use Topher Grace because he does like even if I say Eddie Brock, it doesn't even feel like Eddie Brock from Spider-Man 3. Topher Grace dies at the end of Spider-Man 3 because he thought that the Venom symbiote gave him more power, but the Venom symbiote was just kind of like meh, and doesn't really show anything. Like there was no character of Topher Grace when Topher Grace had Venom.
I mean, I think that like the thing about Spider-Man 3 and the reason that I think that it's kind of impossible to talk about in the context in which that we're like examining these villains is because like that is a movie that was so plagued by production issues and problems of like Sam Raimi did not want to make that movie. That there are so and even just like so like it's like fuck the production issues even like just like raw text on page. That is a movie with it's supposed to have so you've got Spider-Man, Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy, not even Gwen Stacy. She was in the movie for like 5 minutes. Then you've got Venom, Sandman, and also the Green Goblin, and that movie is 2 hours and 30 minutes long, and even that is not long enough. Like you just cannot.
It's 2.5 hours.
2 hours and 30 minutes.
Oh, I'm not watching that.
2.5 hours, y'all.
I'm not watching that movie again. I watched that movie like when I was a kid and I hated it. Then why would I watch it again? Oh god.
I distinctly remember being very hyped from the trailers because the trailers were very good, and I walked out the theater with a massive headache. I'm not even joking.
Wow. That must have been the first time that Sony actually made good trailers, or the first and the last time.
It looked really good at first. Like there was this one part in the trailer where Topher Grace, he's in a church and he's praying and he's like, God, I want you to kill Peter Parker. And it's like, oh shit, this is gonna be a serious ass movie. But it's like, oh no, he just cost him his fucking job.
Chris, are you
sure
sure that's nostalgia kicking in?
Okay.
Because I'm pretty sure that is the dumbest
bad.
fucking
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know.
you were 7.
And if I saw that trailer in 2018 that said that fucking line in it, I would say this movie is going to be fucking shitty. And do you know what it was?
It probably was.
A shitty movie.
Okay. All right.
Spider-Man 3 was a shitty movie.
Well, like you were also 7, Chris, right? And you thought that was cool?
Let's do the math here. It was 11 years ago. I am turning 25 soon.
Okay, I thought you said 7. I'm sorry.
2007. That's when it came out.
No.
But like there's just not enough room in that movie and in that script because like that's the thing is like you can have a movie with like a lot of characters. Like movies are getting much better at writing ensemble casts. Like I don't like them as much as other people, but like the Guardians movies are a good example. Those are like movies with a lot of characters that does actually have like arcs in it.
Hey, Infinity War.
This is. Oh yeah, exactly. Like these are like
Infinity War is a long movie.
Never heard of it.
Whether or not you agree on like characters having arcs, the movie was able to manage a lot of it.
Yeah.
Exactly, and like at this time, like I just, and especially,
just get rid of the snapping scene. Just get rid of that dumb fucking snapping scene.
You know, it just didn't. It could never do anything like really meaningful from a storytelling standpoint. Like I think the closest they get is like Harry, and frankly, like that's who the movie should be about. But they just didn't want to do like Green Goblin. But again, but like Harry's the only interesting one in that, and like, and they don't do a lot with him. They give him amnesia, which sucks because like that is the emotional arc of that entire series, that entire trilogy is Harry's relationship with.
How does he get amnesia?
Peter.
He was chasing down Peter in his new goblin gear, and he hits his head on a metal pipe. So they basically, they sidelined him for the entire like middle of the movie, so they can do their Venom stuff, I guess, and so they can have Peter Parker pointing at ladies in the street.
Yeah, that movie. Because it's trying to do like different comic book. It's trying to do 3 different comic book arcs in one movie. Like,
do you know what they could have done? They should have started the movie with like another villain, like a quick villain, and he ends it like he starts the movie like fighting a bad person, and the person goes away. You don't see them again, but like something happens in that fight that affects Peter, and then that happens to the main villain of the movie. That's how you do a good third or second movie.
Congratulations, Anthony Paone. Amy Pascal has chosen you to be the next screenwriter for Spider-Man.
Holy fuck. Are you serious? Oh my god!
Yeah, it's that easy. I have these leaked emails from Amy Pascal right here in front of me, and
wow, thank you so much.
Anyway, yeah, I think Venom was the studio note. Like, we talked about Avi Arad in the Venom episode, but like he said, the kids love Venom. And he only has a very basic understanding of like why the kids love Venom, so he's just like, Sam Raimi, put Venom in this movie. And
the kids love
Venom. I feel like Sam Raimi was going more for Sandman, but you know what happens after that.
That's just a movie that was just being torn from too many sides to like really actually like tie the knot.
I want Kang the Conqueror. I want Kang the time-traveling conqueror with his lizard pelt. I want it.
Isn't that, there's Kraven the Hunter also.
Kraven the Hunter is the lizard pelt, but King the Conqueror is someone.
Same diff.
My brain is... I've been playing video games all... I've been playing video games all day.
So, moving forward with the timeline.
Kraven the Hunter.
Sam
Parker's
Raimi...
an alien. I'm a fucking idiot.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Sam Raimi.
I'm so bad at this. Ugh.
Yes.
I hate everything. Oh, God. Kraven the Hunter. That's what I want.
Yes, Kraven the Hunter.
Amazing Spider-Man, Chris?
What's that? Yeah, so they were, they gave Sam Raimi a bunch of scripts for Spider-Man 4. He did not like any of them, so he just pieced out. Naturally, the solution was to reboot Spider-Man.
5 years later.
And show Uncle Ben getting shot again, except in a more contrived fashion than in the original movie, because they wanted to do something different. So what they had was Martin Sheen try to like wrestle the gun out of the guy's hand, which ended up getting him shot, which was, I thought, a bad scene. But yeah, Andrew Garfield was Spider-Man. The director was Mark Webb, who I guess was hired, one, because he did 500 Days of Summer, and they're like, oh, Peter Parker, Gwen Stacy romance. Number 2, his last name is Webb. That's my theory, at least. So, the Lizard, Kurt Connors, is the villain of The Amazing Spider-Man. I don't even remember how to pronounce the actor's name. It's like... I remember he was... Yeah, he was Luna Lovegood's dad. That's all I remember him
He
doing.
played Shakespeare, I think, in a really bad Shakespeare movie.
I know what you're talking. Was it Anonymous? Yes. I think is that what it was called?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So they tried to do this whole plot line of what happened to my parents? And it's like Andrew Garfield looking all brooding and stuff and whatever. And so they try to play that up more. They try to make Oscorp a bigger player. Like I think that's how he got bit by the spider in the Oscorp building. So when you get to Kurt Connors, he also has a personal connection with Peter Parker, and he came across as like this very soft-spoken guy, and there was like a sappy scene of like him looking in the mirror because he doesn't have an arm, so he's like, I'm gonna inject myself with this thing. It turned me into a lizard by accident, and now I want to turn everyone into a lizard. So,
as I've mentioned, I believe on another podcast episode, yes, that is the exact same character story of Sauron, which is a giant pterodactyl villain who lives in the Savage Lands.
Oh yeah,
it's a famous. People see it all the time on the internet.
It's a famous panel
where Spider-Man's like, with your intelligence and with this type of technology, you could cure cancer. And then Sauron says, I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs. And
it's a good impression.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
There's so many impressions today.
You're on fire. Yeah, I have it up.
No, I'm not. I made that mistake with Craven and Kang. Ugh.
Oh, whatever. Don't beat yourself up over it.
I always do.
Who remembers the Amazing Spider-Man?
When it first came out, I actually was interested in seeing it because I heard from like a lot of my friends at the time that like, oh, this is good, you should check it out, and then I just never got around to it. And then the second one came out, and I heard that was bad. I was just like, no, I don't even care to see.
Wow. Rousing story.
Rousing story indeed.
Yeah.
Moving.
It's always the word of mouth that'll get you.
Yes. I remember.
Did you see it, Izzy?
Yeah, I watched it. Like I watched it in theaters, but like, it was only that one time. But I remember, like, honestly, when you recap the entire plot, I was like, I don't remember any of that. I just remember like Lizard, like a very naked lizard. I'm like, that's weird. But he was like, I remember him like being like that sort of like tragic figure, but I also think they focus a lot more on like the love stories. Like the villain didn't get that much attention at all. But like the fact that he is like a professor, right? He's a professor. I think that's what you mentioned. Like goes back to like professor, like scientist, like working man, like still goes back to like, like what we've been talking about like relatable characters. But he wasn't. I think he just got sidelined for like. Yeah, he just got really sidelined for like the love story that they wanted to emphasize on.
He seems closer to this is the single one of these movies that I have not seen. But I am fairly familiar with like Spider-Man canon because I really liked him as a superhero when I was a kid. And the Lizard kind of strikes me as like closer to the platonic ideal of what Norman Osborn is supposed to be. Like, oh, he's a man of science, and he wants to get his hands dirty, and so he tests his serum out on himself. But like the difference is in their aspirations. Like Norman wants the super soldiers. Like he wants the money that'll get for making super soldiers. That's his end goal. Whereas like Connors genuinely is like, I have this physical disability. And I would like to not have that anymore. And that it's a much more like empathetic goal, and that is why it is tragic, because like it's not like a Norman Osborn's more of a violent delights have violent ends kind of guy, where it's like he sucks and like no matter like what he does, people will die. But like Connors did something that he genuinely believed would like help the world, and it broke him, and now he is like an active participant into trying to like gas the city effectively.
Right. It went back to that whole trope of like, because he turned into a lizard man, and for some reason he had the idea that like that is the
peak form of
life
humanity,
form, quote unquote. So if you've somehow sat through those new Ridley Scott Alien movies and that is literally Michael Fassbender's ambition to create the perfect life form, which for some reason is this giant murderous alien with acid blood. Makes very little sense to me. And when you put it on paper, the third act of The Amazing Spider-Man is copy-paste from Batman Begins, because it involves a villain trying to gas the entire city. I have like a mini theory of like what Sony was trying to do, because when they first announced Andrew Garfield's reboot, they used the overused terms dark, gritty, and the fact that literally all of the action scenes took place at night was like, okay, alright, someone saw Batman Begins before this. Likewise, we'll talk about Amazing Spider-Man 2 in a bit. Everything took place during the day, and everything was bright and world building, and I was like, okay, someone saw The Avengers before this.
Yeah.
These are not original movies.
Those movies are... Those are so designed by committee, like,
yeah,
because Sony got, oh god, that leak was so good. We saw all their emails, like, we know that, and also it's just like pretty obvious, just that they did not want to give up the rights, so they rebooted
like a Fantastic Four
situation.
situation.
Those movies are so, yeah, it's such a. I mean, like, we know that there's that like infamous one where it's like, I think the kids really seem to like DJs and electronic
dance music, in parentheses EDM.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think it seems like Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 1 is like a movie that kind of like stumbled into blandness, it seems. I just purely going off of critical reception and the way that you guys are talking about it, just it was a movie that lucked out, because like clearly that happy accident could not be repeated. And also, like, genuinely there are a lot of very talented people working on that movie. Like, I think Mark Webb is a really competent director. Like, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is a pretty good show.
And he did that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm sure he's directed some episodes for that, right?
Yeah, and like 500 Days of Summer is like that's sort of like the Fight Club of Manic Pixie Dream Girl movies, where it's like critiquing the thing but just doing it too, and so like the way that people interpret that movie is kind of like counter to what it's doing. But like, right. He's a good director who knows what he's doing. Andrew Garfield's a fucking great actor. Emma Stone kicks ass as Gwen Stacy. But it's such a thing of like old people trying to figure out like, oh, what are the kids like now? Like, what are the kids like about Spider-Man that we put in there? And so like there seems very little to the Lizard beyond like who his canon demands him to be.
Yeah, because like I feel like I was like, when this movie came out, I was like, what, 14? So I was somewhat of the market, and that's how I felt like Andrew Garfield. Like, he was not only like attractive, but like, oh, he's like someone who like is like if he was real, like, I'd date him, essentially. Like, he was... I'm sorry, this did not come out the way I wanted to. But
Andrew, get on the phone.
That did not... But, essentially shaping it to what the kids want these days. Like, I feel like it did feel, like, very tailored to, like, what my market, like, wanted. Like, it was, like, focusing more on, like, the human aspect and like pushing like the villains off to the side and just really just trying to get into like what the kids want. And I think because like this movie critically was like okay, but I think it was the fact that it was like another Spider-Man, and it's new, and it's not Spider-Man 3. But like I think it really did like barely scrape by because of just pure luck. And like, yeah, we think we understand them, and schmucks like me when they were 14 caught it. So,
my sister has some friends who love that dynamic between Peter and Gwen. And those two movies.
Especially because Andrew and Emma dated. That was a big thing. Like,
yeah, and then so like my sister, I was not obviously not here, but like my sister watched The Amazing Spider-Man 2 with her friends. And when Gwen Stacy died, all of them started crying, and my sister just kind of turned to them, and she's like, "You weaklings!"
Yeah, like I mean, I think I remember feeling like when they dressed up, like when like she was wearing like the outfit she wore when she died, and I'm like, oh, she's gonna die, isn't she?
Right.
Oh
Sure.
man, I'm really impressed that they managed to make it to the end of that movie and remaining emotionally invested.
Yeah, like I
don't know.
wasn't invested.
I don't know how.
Yo, Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 fucking whips ass. I fucking love that movie.
I have only seen that on a like a shitty cam version on a shady website. I have not actually seen it in full
Seen
HD.
illegally. Chris Compendio,
Yes.
watcher of illegal 2014 movies.
Arrest me, FBI! You have the evidence right here on audio.
Did you know that you can just like admit to crimes on a podcast and no one will do anything about it? I listened to there's a podcast that is helmed by Twitter user Stefan Heck, and on that podcast he admits to stabbing a fellow student when he was in school. And
What
it was
the
like
fuck?
I was like, what is happening right now? This is a comedy podcast. Oh my lord. Yeah, you can just say whatever the fuck you want to.
Oh man.
Damn.
Joey Diaz on
Pirates.
this is kind of like tattling on myself. I obviously do not listen to it anymore because Joe Rogan is a fucking scumbag. But like I listened to his podcast when I was like very young, and Joey Diaz on that show admits to selling cocaine to Whitney and Bobby Houston. Man, those guys are bad news.
Yikes.
Sorry to go on a tangent like that.
Yikes.
Yeah,
That tangent
like
went
Elon Musk, I'm
somewhere.
smoking a blunt on this show. No. I'm
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, you can just do crimes on podcasts and nobody cares for some reason.
Yeah, that's the next step of the true crime genre of podcasts, where you actually do podcasts where you commit crimes.
You commit. The podcast tells you what crime to commit.
Yeah. What were you reading, Anthony?
I'm reading just a bunch of Old Man Logan stuff because I got sucked into a trap hole of like Peter. I looked up Kraven the Hunter, then there was Raven the Hunter, and then it turns out Raven the Hunter is from the same universe as Spider-Ham, and then from Spider-Ham I went into...
Wait. Is Raven the Hunter just a raven?
Yes.
That's amazing.
That's great.
Peter in Peter Porker's universe, it is an entire universe where all the superheroes and supervillains are all animals. So you have Goose Rider, Stephen Mauser, aka Captain Americat. Then you have Bat Burdock, or as they know him, Daredevil.
God damn it.
So yeah, it's called the Larval Universe.
Is this some sort of Orwellian like communism?
Came out in
metaphor, like Animal
1987.
Farm?
This has been around long before we were born.
Yeah, I remember playing like some like Spider-Man app game, and Spider-Ham is a character like you can unlock, and you have to like you can like win.
John Mulaney is voicing him, I believe. In
Yes.
Spider-Verse.
John Mulaney is voicing him in the new movie. I am very excited.
Not in Spider-Verse, it's Jamie Foxx who played Electro in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
What a great
remember
segue!
that movie?
What a great segue!
Right.
What a bad movie that
What a
was.
movie!
Jamie Foxx was a very sad dude in this movie. I wrote here, he was a nobody, a schmuck employee in a giant corporation who was kind of verbally harassed by Ryan from The Office.
Yes, that is correct, and also that is the kind of the origins of Electro, kind of like just some guy, some electrician who gets struck by lightning.
In here it was electric eels.
Electric
I'm
eels.
gonna get to it in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
He falls in the tank,
Of
and the
electric
eels
eels.
surround him, and one of them looks at him in the eyes before attacking him, and it's like, this is a stupid movie. Like,
Yeah.
what am I watching?
And I don't get, what do they have, like Venom that changes his DNA?
He like revives like Frankenstein's monster style in like that weird asylum. What were you about to say, Thomas?
And then when he is turned, it closes the gap in Jamie Foxx's teeth, which seems kind of unnecessarily cruel to Jamie Foxx, you know?
Yeah.
Let him live his life.
Wait, whoa. Wait a fucking minute. What?
Yeah.
Oh, you heard that correctly.
I can rattle off my favorite beats from that movie like by heart. I fucking love The Amazing Spider-Man 2. That movie is like a truly, truly bad movie. And it's incredibly funny for it.
The fact that the end scene is Rhino, and it's like, oh, that's it. That's the movie.
There's a sequence when Jamie Foxx, the gears are turning in his head, and he's turning on Spider-Man for like literally no reason. Like this movie is like devoid of character motivation, and in his head, the score that's been joint composed by legends of music, Hans Zimmer and Pharrell Williams, is playing, and it's this like spoken word dubstep, and it's whispered. It's like rhythmic whispering. And there's a line that's like, he lied to me. He hates on me. Like, his internal monologue is fucking Mario.
Well, if you got a rapper,
it's so good.
You gotta play some rap in the movie.
Yeah. It's fucking amazing. Oh, God damn it, I love that
listen
movie.
To, it'll be under, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Deluxe Edition soundtrack on Spotify, composed by Hans Zimmer and the Magnificent Six, because it has, like, Pharrell Williams, Johnny Marr, from, like, all of his collaborations and like Inception and like Despicable Me with Pharrell, and like there's a track that's just called the Electro Suite, and it's just like an extended version of that. And then at the end, you can kind of hear them kind of jamming at the end, like in like kind of a post credits vibe, where they're kind of like, yeah, try that again, and it sounds really good. It's like,
oh hell yeah, inject
great.
That shit directly into my veins.
Yeah, I kind of like that Electro
God.
theme.
This movie is awful. Quick aside.
Great.
Did Jamie Foxx rap in Baby Driver?
No.
Good. Just making sure I forget.
Okay.
See, the good movies are where you don't abuse his ability to rap. If you have Jamie Foxx in your movie, it seems.
Yeah, no, that's what I was. Wait, I think there was a rap in Robin Hood.
I didn't watch that
the movie that we all saw.
I watched a vlog video about it. It was really bad.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
They're setting up a cinematic universe with that one.
Anywho, was Jamie Foxx sympathetic? Because he just seemed he like idolized Spider-Man after like one encounter, and then immediately just like hated him, like Thomas said. Like it just seemed pathetic to me, honestly.
I think it was the villains are teaming up type of thing.
But like did he die? Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah,
he just
does
died.
Die. He wasn't even supposed to be in
There was no
Sinister
resolution
6.
to his character.
Like, because he was just like not a great constructed character. Like I remember seeing him like in the movie. I was like, this villain's kind of depressing. Like for a Spider-Man movie, I'm like,
he's like talking to himself in his apartment, and like
also like the visual effects didn't do great with Electro. I'm sorry, that's my opinion. I mean that might be unanimous, but he wasn't really. He just wasn't great, and he kind of like I think they tried to make him relatable, right? It's like a nobody snuck a boy who got like bullied and like abused by like his superiors. Like I'm literally reading Chris's notes again, I think, but like it just didn't come across. Maybe it was Jamie Foxx. Now I'm thinking about it, but like it just didn't come across.
Look, if you're going to let BJ Novak steamroll you, I don't think you deserve my sympathy.
Yeah, like he was just a depressing villain, like for a Spider-Man standpoint.
Yeah, his character kind of reminds me of I want to say his name's Hector Hammond from the Green Lantern movie, where he is like miserable and pathetic, and by an accident that really isn't his fault. Like he's just like trying to plug some stuff in, and then he falls in the tank. And like Hector Hammond accidentally gets the yellow, the fear goo on him, and then they both get used by other people. Like Electro is captured and tortured, and then Harry Osborn decides to free him or whatever, because why? Who can even say? And then he dies, and the same thing happens to Hector Hammond, where Hector Hammond is used by Parallax to like do whatever Parallax needs, and then he's killed. And like it's just it's like simpering. It's you're right. It's like more than pathetic. It's like truly tragic, where it's not even like there was a possibility for redemption. Just something happened that was random, and then he died. It's nihilistic.
It's like it's sadistic in a way of like the story is just torturing this dude for our own enjoyment. Like, it's bizarre,
and it's not even good.
Yeah. His hair also pre-transformation was just like his look, his whole nerd
tragic.
Look, like making Jamie Foxx look not cool was an interesting choice. Yeah. Dane Dehaan was also in this movie.
That was such a disappointment. Like, I thought.
Okay.
I just jumped straight into that, but I just have thoughts. I remember thinking, because that's when I was starting to get into movies. I was like, oh, Dane Dehaan. Like, I personally didn't like Chronicle that much, but it's like, oh, Dane Dehaan's like a good actor, so he must be like, he's probably gonna be great in this movie, right? He wasn't. I thought it was interesting that they included him, but like that's when you start to realize like, oh, there's gonna be like too much. Like we haven't even gone to Rhino yet, and like just putting Green Goblin in your movie, like off the gate, like that's very loaded. And
so here is my entire interpretation of how they handled his character. So, I really like Dane Dehaan. I can name multiple movies that he was in that I liked him in. Valerian's not one of them, by the way, but they had to play catch up because he was not in the first movie. So their first scene had to be them like going back and forth, like really easygoing, like they've been friends the whole time, and it just didn't really work for me. And his whole motivation was that, hey, my dad, Chris Cooper, died from this horrible disease, and I have it too. I might or might not need your spider blood, DNA, whatever, for the cure. And Spider-Man's like, no, that's a stupid idea. I'm not gonna give it to you. And so Dane Dehaan's like, I hate you, Spider-Man. So when he finally does inject it into himself, he goes nuts and he turns all green and monsterish. And I guess this was a deleted scene where they explains where the glider came from. But in the final movie, as far as I remember, he just steps onto the glider, which the audience doesn't know what that is, and he just becomes the Green Goblin. And the next scene you see him in, he just flies in, and he's just the Green Goblin. And I'm like, wait, what is happening in this movie? And then he takes he takes a look at Gwen Stacy and Spider-Man for like 5 seconds, and he's like, "You're Peter Parker," and then the whole thing, it's someone else talk, please. I'm mad.
Yeah, because like I think they didn't want to have like Harry in the first one, because that's like exactly what they're doing that's like exactly what the last Spider-Man
the Sam Raimi's movie did. Yeah,
exactly. So they didn't want to do that, and like there are ways in movies where like you don't need to have like his childhood friend in the first movie to understand that they're childhood friends, but this movie just did it really badly.
They skip rocks together.
Exactly.
It's such a waste to. It's another issue of like a movie with too many threads and also production issues. Like again, like the Sony leaks, it's clear that they had no fucking and they want to have the super spy angle as well. Like they are so scattershot about every element of that movie that none of it can be like developed in any like real meaningful way for like criticism at all. Because like I genuinely do think that like, oh cool, like my dad has a weird incurable disease and I need Spider-Man's blood, but Spider-Man is afraid of what will happen if he gives it away. Like that in and of itself actually like is an interesting nougat that creates real tension that is not just like Spider-Man has to hit this guy a bunch. They have to have a talk about like the ramifications and like blah blah blah, but like that is obviously not what happens because it's too interested in being like cool, whatever that means, and having like all these things that are meant to appeal to everyone, and then so it ultimately like is for nobody. And oh man, just I'm glad that Marvel has the rights to Spider-Man now.
Yeah, and like they were trying to still
I don't
shove
know,
in
man.
Sinister Six.
Did Homecoming have EDM?
Sort of.
I think there was the moment.
That's a house party.
In Homecoming at the party. There was the house party.
Oh, I mean the kids do love
run
EDM.
By Flash.
So, yeah.
You can argue whether or not that is EDM.
Yeah. The only thing I will say about Rhino is that Spider-Man put his pants down and he had boxer shorts with rhinos on them. And the very last scene of the movie is him getting shot up by cops when they stop. And then he takes off like the top of his suit, leaving him exposed. And then he yells, "I am the Rhino." That is all I will say about the Rhino in this movie.
I think that's all we need to say.
Paul Giamatti is very fun to watch. Lady in the Water, great movie.
This is the second time. Second time Lady in the Water has been referenced.
Yes.
That's good.
Good continuity.
It's what's called a callback.
Comedy.
Yeah.
Talk about Vulture now?
Yeah, Thomas, did you want to start off since this whole idea was kind of based on your thoughts about the Vulture? Like we've talked about the Vulture before in a different episode, so I wanted you to start off and kind of guide us through your thought process.
Absolutely. Like, okay. Oh baby. Oh yeah. Fucking yo. The most recent phase of the MCU is like extremely my shit because it feels like I know I'm kind of like sipping from a poison well because like oh boy, like Disney hyper capitalist Disney and Marvel who like literally wasn't it last year or 2 years ago that Marvel had that big announcement there where they were literally like, hey, we're partnering with a weapons firm. And then they canceled it because everybody was like, what are you talking about?
What? Wait, what?
Yeah, hold up. Marvel
what?
Partners with weapons.
Oh yeah, I remember this.
I know there was those tweets by the CIA. It's just like, hey, you remember those cool Marvel movies?
It was a Comic-Con event that was going to be sponsored by an arms manufacturer, which is the most Marvel thing that's happened of all time.
Yeah, I remember that.
Wow.
That was a lot of
controversy. But the more recent movies have been making more like kind of pointed commentaries on like, you know, social issues, like even more overtly than like the older ones, which are kind of just like stand up for the little guy, which like, what does that mean really? Where like there's that line in Thor Ragnarok where they literally just call prison labor slavery because it is. And there's like a lot more undercurrents of like actual real things that people say and have points to make about. And like this movie is really interested in like class in a way. Like something I definitely noticed was that like the locations in the movie are like very intentional. Like I think it is not an accident that when we finally get to the Vulture's house, it's really nice. He lives in a really nice house. Yes. And I don't think that it quite goes all the way that it could.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that the Vulture is a villain who is just a dude. He's just a person. He's a worker whose villainy is directly a response to not even the government, but like the actual Avengers. When they come to take his gig away at the beginning of the movie and put him and everybody else out of a job, the face that he is shown of authority is Tony Stark's face. And I think it's interesting that this is a movie that is like trying to grapple with like not just how like the Avengers have had this kind of negative impact in certain ways in the world, but also like the way that it is kind of depicting interclass struggle. Like Peter Parker is once again like a poor
class conflict
Manhattan student who lives with his single aunt and everything. It is very much like this, like I said populist earlier, this is the most populist Spider-Man movie that has been made.
This is the most clash conscious Spider-Man movie ever made.
Yeah, like I agree with pretty much everything you said. Like I remember like it took me the second time watching Spider-Man 2, like Spider-Man Homecoming, to really enjoy it. And you're right, like he is like Michael Keaton. I think Michael Keaton is the most like tragic, relatable villain we had. Like everything you said, like that's what this whole episode's about. And like the fact that yes, I don't think that Spider-Man: Homecoming goes all the way in dealing and like talking about like these like socioeconomic class issues and these larger infrastructure government infrastructures, but it at least lays the groundwork for what Marvel can do, and that's almost as important. I don't think any of the movies we've seen since then have really tackled that. Maybe Black Panther, but in a different way and in a different context. But at least with this movie, like we really start talking about it, and I don't think any superhero movie, a big superhero movie, has like really addressed it to that level, which isn't substantial, and that's saying a lot.
I think it's I think that lends credence to what the MCU kind of is. Other superhero movies, you really can't. I mean, you could, like Watchmen could have, maybe in a way, but there's really no discussion in any other superhero movie because you can't really discuss about class without dissecting how class structure works using other movies. And I think that's what makes Homecoming work, is that there's other movies that make it make sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like...
Yeah. I was also going to say...
You understand how the universe is set up. You understand that it's basically just like ours. You understand that the Avengers work with... are an authority figure of some kind, and their influence affects how other government systems affect other people.
Homecoming cannot exist without the is it the Chitauri?
Yes.
I can't
Yes.
remember. The invasion of New York in the first Avengers movie. Can't exist without that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to compare this to both Sandman and Electro in that they are like, with Sandman, it's like, oh, he's a down on his luck family man, but I think they also try to have like the retroactive, like instead of the Chitauri, it's the shooting of Ben Parker, but there was something about that felt very artificial, contrived, and then obviously with Electro, that just did not, like, none of the little guy stuff that they were trying like resonated. So it's I doubt it was like a conscious effort to correct that, but like the Vulture felt like a more refined, relatable, interesting, relevant way to do all of that stuff.
I almost want to say that in some aspects, Spider-Man: Homecoming almost tackles like the impact of like the Avengers and sort of like the negative sides to this team more than like Civil War did with the Sokovia Accords.
The universe, like,
Well,
it expands more of like the universe in the sense of like what is an average person doing? What are the people doing? What are workers in the Marvel universe doing? What is the structure of a kid living in a world filled with superheroes like? And I think that's amazing. And the only other movie that comes close to tackling, like, I mean, this movie doesn't go deep into it. The only other movie that goes way deeper than this is Black Panther, and that covers hundreds of years of racial issues across the planet in that one film, and that's something that made it far more extraordinary than any other superhero movie out there.
I'm saying like that,
and that's what made it that unique. Whereas this was more of like, it was building upon other elements of the universe, so that you understand that this universe has structures just like ours, and you are seeing how those structures influence the day-to-day life of the people in that reality, just like how the structures in our reality affect the day-to-day people.
I'm saying like the nuances of like the Avengers, like that's what Spider-Man: Homecoming does almost at times better than Civil War, like understanding like that though their faults from the aspect of the people, because you get to have that lens and all that. I
think the Marvel Netflix shows, which I guess are a dying breed at this point, but like
they're dead.
They're
pretty much dead.
Yeah, they examine different aspects of that too. Like we mentioned this in our TV movie episode, but the fact that like Daredevil kind of talks about the gentrification and the rising prices of rent, like as a result of the New York attack, and Jessica Jones kind of goes into the the psychological effects and the paranoia around enhanced superpowered people. You know, like Luke Cage had like a little bit of like this guy trying to sell like DVD, like illegal DVD copies of footage from the New York attack, and you know, even Iron Fist in that awful mental asylum episode, but like there was a one bit where like the doctor is like, oh yeah, after the incident, like a lot of people were like they believed that they had some kind of superpower the same way the Avengers do. So it's like I guess sum up what we're all saying, it's about the people at the ground level, like what is happening to them as a result of all of the fantastical nonsense that you see up. Like, so Civil War is about, hey, there's this change coming. How do the actual big hero titans figure that out? And Homecoming's more like, okay, but we gotta pick up your scraps.
Rewatching it, it was because when I first saw it, I was not really like paying super close attention. And I had just moved, so I was not like very present when I saw it. But then afterwards, everybody started talking about, oh, Michael Keaton's Vulture is like very, like he's just kind of a guy. It's very populist and like blah blah blah. And now rewatching it, I think, I agree that that's what the movie's about, but I don't even necessarily know if I agree that that's totally the point that they're making with Keaton's character, because there are a couple of wrinkles with him that I think are like very significant. Is like, one, when he steals the technology, it's for him and his. He's not really like, he's not distributing it. He's not redistributing the tech or the means to do this. He's just running a crew. And so that there is something about that is like the way that the institutional economic oppression of sort of the ruling class, it's sort of the way that this is. It's sort of like if a couple cab drivers were like trying to kill Elon Musk. Yeah, like that's really the dynamic that's going on in that movie.
Yeah, but like, what if the cab drivers all had Wakandan tech?
But the big shift is that Keaton is like willing to kill, and he's willing to kill a kid. Like, he knows that Spider-Man is a kid, and I think that is like an interesting. I think that the movie wants to present that as like, this is why he's a villain and you shouldn't sympathize with him at all. But like, that's what our society does. That's what capitalism does. Is it economically oppresses certain people, and in this case, it's just kind of like generally workers. But there is like a more specific point to be made about who gets economically oppressed. But then there's
who gets oppressed? Who wants the oppressed thing? Do you want to be oppressed today? Hey, you get to be oppressed. Congrats.
It's interesting to me that like by the end of the movie, when we see him in his house, it is a really nice house, and I don't necessarily know if this is like supposed to be overt in the text, but I definitely think the read is there that Keaton has sort of benefited from wealth to a level that it has begun to like rot his brain. Like, you know how rich people like kind of don't feel empathy or like don't really seem to understand people even if they once did. Like Kanye West.
There's a good video actually by Peter Coffin on wealth hoarders, but that goes deep into how bad capitalism is. But that's a story for another time. But yes, basically Michael Keaton having Adrian Toomes having money, basically made his character worse. Like not his character, but like made him as like more morally worse. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Compromised, okay. Yeah. Because like,
yeah, he gold pilled. That's the word. That's the actual term that people use.
Because the whole time, like, we kind of assume that he's downtrodden, and he is, and he starts that way, and the fact that he has to do this to like provide for his people and his family is like the true injustice. But like at a certain point, it's clear that he has kind of decided to reap the benefits and to. I've been thinking. Okay, this is related. I promise.
Sure.
I've been playing Gravity Rush 2. It's $6 on PlayStation Network right now. Please pick it up. And I was shocked about how directly that game portrayed intra-class conflict. So like you start off with this group of people who like mine or whatever to scrape by for a living, and then you get that stolen by a trader who is like works in an echelon between the wealth and the poor. He even though he interacts with the wealthy, they do not see him as one of them because he's not. And then you also get your stuff stolen by there's like literally a gang, and they live in like the poor district in this flying city. And that is kind of, I think, what is happening in Spider-Man Homecoming. Is Michael Keaton's Vulture is one of these people who has no choice but to like, you know, rob to make a living. And so it just kind of it's that class of people is just turned against each other, and they are hurting each other. Like Spider-Man is a poor kid from Queens, even though like, yeah, he has Tony Stark's $1 million suit and like some backing from him. He's still like living in a small apartment. Like I said, like location's really important in this movie. Like there's a level of like violence, interclass violence in this movie that I don't think is like presented as finely as it could or should be, but like it's there, and
it's
really
there, which is really interesting when you're like diving into this movie, because like on this like if you were looking at bare surface, none of this doesn't talk about it, but that's because you're looking at it without any sort of like you're watching this movie in a vacuum if you're not thinking about any of that.
I mean that opening scene was like, hey, the government is taking your job away, and we're just leaving you to the dogs.
Not even a government; it's a private company.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I forgot if damage control was government or private.
Given money by the federal government,
right? Okay,
which is also bad.
Because I'm thinking about like that news story about like Kanye and Kim having private firefighters in California or something like that.
Yeah.
Like,
it's.
Like, what happens when we private? If all this is privatized and only the rich people have these services. Shit's fucked,
and
man.
that's the
Are
thing.
Superheroes
like,
workers? Are superheroes workers?
I don't think so. Well, I think it depends.
I
think it probably depends.
I think it probably depends too, but it's
PMCs.
very interesting to think about. Like, I know Iron Man is definitely not a worker, but is like. Black Panther's not a worker.
He's a king.
Black Panther's a monarchist.
Well, I think
is Hawkeye a worker? But like he also works for a spy company, so obviously not. Oh my god!
A point of comparison
Ant-Man.
might be
Scott
like,
Lang's a worker. Scott Lang's a worker.
Like police unions are not considered to like fall under labor interests because they are dedicated to preserving the interests of the state. Like that is the line that's towed in like leftist organizations about that. So I think it would probably depend. Like Batman's not a laborer. He's a fascist. If you're a fascist, you cannot be a laborer. You know.
I feel like this, Chris. I think this should be a really good talking, like an episode. I think we're kind of like going into another episode point.
We're gonna cover fascism at some point.
We should do the fascism episode, and then we should do another episode immediately after. It's like which superheroes are workers, and we just break down every single one.
I was gonna do the same thing, but except or which ones are gay. But yeah,
that's
sure.
yeah.
What are you going to say, Thomas?
That's the thing is like Tony doesn't have to actually deal with the fallout of any of this shit. Like the closest he comes to like having to suffer a potential consequence is the boat scene when all those people are almost killed, and that is more just sort of a plot beat, so that way Peter can feel admonished, rather than like really making a point about like Tony's role in all this. He just kind of shows up to scold and then leaves.
Tony's arc surrounding Peter has not ended yet. It should end in Avengers 4. Does that make sense? Like, at the end of Spider-Man Homecoming, Tony does not realize how shitty he was to Peter. At all. In Avengers 3, he doesn't... He helps him and he wants him to be a part of this. And then Tony learns that he fails. In Avengers 4, he needs to learn how he was not good for him. He was not good for Peter. Does that make... And that would complete it. But it's upsetting that you don't see that in Homecoming.
And even more directly than, like, whether or not he understands how he affects, like, Peter on a personal level. Like, he doesn't know who the Vulture is until he's, like, told by Happy, I guess, at the end. When he, like, and that's why he makes him the Avengers offer. But, like, Tony Stark literally at no fucking point did he at all have any idea of what was happening, why Peter was trying to stop it, who the Vulture was, or why he was the Vulture. Like,
and also why was he the Vulture? Yeah, as you just said, like, what caused him to be that?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, Tony's the one who should be forced to experience reckoning here, not Peter.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine that Peter does, like, from a storytelling standpoint, like, it's good. Like, it is that twist.
He learns how to be the hero, like, physically overcoming various obstacles, etc. That's why it works as a good origin movie.
Yeah, and that's, I think,
that type of stuff.
The fact that Tony does not end up having to deal with it is why I don't feel as strongly about this as, like, a work portraying leftism as I think some other people, or not portraying leftism, but like exploring
of course.
labor, as other people, because the person that labor is ultimately positioned against does not have to, like, it is not dealt with in the movie at all, really. And that's why I think that, like, I hesitate they did it. You know?
One of the things that, like, I've mentioned, it's like, I don't think that, I mean, currently we're not going to be seeing any of these major talking points of leftism in Marvel movies for a few years, unless people's, like, unless, I don't know, Taika Waititi wants to include it in whatever random movie he starts making by just reading shit about, just reading marks. But I don't, that's why, like, I think it's like, yeah, they'll talk about it, but they'll talk about it in, like, the menial sense, the same way that, like, you talk to, like, your average laborer and just say, like, hey, unions are good. And they're just like, yeah, unions are good. And that. I think that kind of understanding, that populist understanding, that, like, that's the bare minimum.
I feel you.
Yeah, so. But, yeah. Chris, do you want to...
Man.
We were just going...
No, that was good. Oh, boy. Sees the means of projection. Anyway, yeah, I mean... I guess one way to connect all of the villains together is kind of like their last scene that you kind of seen them with. So, like Michael Keaton's last scene was him not disclosing... Was not sharing Peter Parker's identity to Mac Gargan. Kind of showing that, okay, yeah, this kid's gained my respect. It's a little moment of redemption. The Lizard has that in the jail scene where he's like, you should leave the boy alone, and Sandman has that, Doc Ock has that, whereas, like, Green Goblin still tries to murder him, which is then when he said, don't tell Harry.
Yeah.
And then Venom and Electro just fucking die.
Yeah.
Venom and Electro?
Yeah. What's that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, you were...
He got blown up.
I was like, what?
I thought you said, like, Electrode for a second. Like, that's a Pokemon.
Yeah, Electrode, use self-destruct. So, yeah, I'm wondering, like, what are things that, with the whole idea that, hey, Kevin Feige came in here in making the Spider-Man movie and being like, okay, we're not going to do the same things that the other movies did. we are going to not do another origin story. We are not going to start off with the Green Goblin. We're not going to start off with the Gwen Stacy romance. So I'm wondering, like, what do you think they learned from all the non-MCU movies to create that Vulture character, if any lessons at all? And how do you think they're going to, like, Anthony, you were talking about Mysterio, so, like, any speculation on, like, what they might have done with him?
So some of the things with, like the face value superhero Spider-Man villains is that they're cartoonishly villains, in the sense that there's what you see in the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans, where it's like the good and the bad side of them, and they're very distinct and very, very clear. Like, there are good aspects and there are bad aspects, and then they're both layered in the same person, but they're not interacting at all. There are two separate layers that don't interact. Whereas when you have Adrian Toomes, you have them both coinciding, being as the bad actions are results of trying to do good or trying to do right based on certain understandings of morals. That's way more complicated than what we had in the past. And I think moving forward, I think that when you have your Mysterio, I think they're also doing a chameleon. So it's like a shapeshifter type of villain. I think it will more have to do with Peter's psyche, but when it comes to and how he has to be more adult about these types of things when it comes to being a superhero, which will be interesting. But I think when it comes to how they're going to deal with Mysterio and the villains in the movie itself, I don't know. I think it's going to be. I hope it's more of the same. Like the whatever his name is. He's like, the villains are people that were damaged by the systems, and that their fallback is being villains. And it's about Peter understanding those systems. And that's how you kind of break it down.
Does he understand the systems?
I hope he does. Like, to learn, to say, oh, that's bad. The systems that cause the villains to be that way.
Izzy and Thomas, any thoughts on that?
Actually, because you're right, like, the systems that, I think that in some fundamental way, like, Peter learning the systems, like, that's how he becomes a hero, like, obviously. But I would know, yeah, I remember now. I was gonna say, well, based on, like, the background you're describing for Mysterio, it's almost like, it feels both very, like, it feels both like a challenge to do, because Mysterio is a special effects technician, and he uses his own and like, he makes his own, like, hallucinogenic drugs that'll trick Peter. Like, that seems like, compared to all these villains we've had, like, that's very, like, it feels very, like, showy and technical, and, like, it really stands out among, like, the rogues gallery that we've listed so far. And, like, that'll be interesting to see how Marvel tackles this. But at the same time, like, I feel like the arts industry in and of itself is still very, very hard to break into. And, like, that special effects, the VFX technician aspect might already lend itself, so it gives itself, like, an easier hand. I might be misinterpreting
they might even just make him. They might make him like a street magician. I mean, they might change it up drastically.
It's in Europe, right?
Yeah,
like, it is in Europe, but I mean, it's played by Mysterio's played by Jake Gyllenhaal. I mean,
an American boy.
I've never heard Jake Gyllenhaal ever do an accent of any kind.
An American boy.
I don't know if they're gonna try to do this, because, like, I was thinking, like, are they gonna try to make this prestige-y? Because that would be kind of cool. Like, if they were just like, hey, we're gonna make this like the Prestige, but, like, mixed with like Euro Trip. I don't know, but, like, just think about that right before the trailers come out.
I don't want to. Okay.
The Prestige mixed with Euro Trip. That's the image I'm giving to all of you out there. Just try to wrap your brain around that.
Well, because also
it'll be interesting.
Yeah, because this film is also, if you're thinking about it, this film is so Far From Home is basically going to be Iron Man 3 for another generation almost, because it's dealing with the after effects of this huge movie that we still don't know the answers to, obviously because they haven't come out yet. So it's still dealing. So I'm hoping that Far From Home still balances what Homecoming's done so well with the fact that you just came off of one of, actually no, at that point, the biggest superhero movie we are ever going to have right now. And so I think you have to, and so I hope like Marvel deals with that like in a nuanced way. But yeah, I think pretty much like, I think it's not just like the previous Spider-Man movies, but also just the MCU in general, because we've mentioned like Homecoming is a very like MCU ingrained movie, like that without like a bunch of these, without like the Avengers, like Homecoming couldn't have happened. And so I think it's not just learning from the previous Spider-Man films, but also the MCU.
No, I see what you were getting at. It's like how Feige and co. saw what we already have in the MCU, and said, okay, how are we going to take what we already have, this plethora of things that we already know, and how are we going to make just some random kid be affected by all of this?
Yeah.
And how are we going to make the villain of that movie also be affected by this?
They know how to take previous established events in movies and have that as like the prelude, as the context for a new story.
Yeah.
Like the same way I was like glowing to you guys in the Thanksgiving episode about how Ant-Man and the Wasp used Civil War as like the premise of that movie.
And
so,
a lot of Phase 3 movies talked about this as well. It's about, and like I always bring it back to that Polygon article that I mentioned at the beginning of our show, back in May and June. There was that one Polygon article after Homecoming came out about how the movie brings up legacy in the MCU. And that is something incredibly important moving forward, and how the characters and not only the main superheroes, but also the supervillains are going to be affected by the legacy of the movies that came before it. And how is that going to affect their psyche, their physical powers, their the people they interact with, side characters, supporting characters, all that. How is they going to all be affected by the movies that came before it? And it's actually applying it appropriately, because this is the only time we've ever seen something of this magnitude. 10 plus movies, 20 plus movies.
Yeah, it's being aware about not just like the greater world, but also about their own universe. Like it's being aware at all sides.
Yeah, that as well. Not like the movies that came out in their the events that happened in their universe and the events that happen in our universe, and how is that going to apply back and forth? And I think that will be interesting, is going between what happens here and what happens there.
Thomas, what you got? Take us home.
Okay, one quick question. Do we know where in the timeline Far From Home is taking place? Is it going to be
immediately after
Before Infinity War premiered, they said it would be right after Avengers 4. That's what they said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he's going to be... So
it will be
so,
the
like,
Iron Man 3
sure
of this new world.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like 100% sure that they're going to kill Tony Stark, because I'm pretty sure that Robert Downey Jr. would like to do anything other than another Iron Man role.
Well, they never pointed it out, but they pointed out specifically that this was Steve Rogers' last movie.
Okay.
So I think what they'll do is they'll make Tony, like, they'll send Tony away to do his own thing and not be involved at all. And then, like, maybe further down the line, I don't know, I'm probably going to hate it.
That's what Walking Dead did with Rick Grimes a few weeks ago.
No,
yeah,
I heard...
to send him off into the sunset.
Yeah, wait, because I saw a tweet that said, I think it was from someone like significant that said, yes, this is Captain America's last movie, but he's not done. And so I don't know what that implies, but I think like
that. Well, that's probably clickbait, but it's probably like he can still sign more movies to be in. Like
he can appear whenever he wants.
What were you saying, Thomas? What were you saying?
Sorry about that.
Before you went on the tangent.
Initially, I was gonna say that I think that Spider-Man's villains work best when they have motivations and lives outside of Spider-Man. Like Doc Ock has, I mean, like Doc Ock kind of is a grudge-based villain because he wants to get back at New York for like taking his juice and killing his wife. But like Michael Keaton's Vulture is really interesting because he just like every time Spider-Man shows up, he's like, oh, this fucking guy again. Spider-Man comes to him. It's not a grudge match. All these other movies have all been grudge matches. It's like you're Sandman, you killed my dad or my second dad. And like Venom, like I hate Spider-Man because I'm Eddie Brock and I'm Venom, and like fucking the Green
wow,
Dot,
that's
like, all
that's
that shit.
You sound like one of those like animated like fan clips. Was like I'm bad. Ooh, ah.
Yeah. That's all grudge based, and like I don't really think that that's particularly interesting or valuable tension. Like what really works about Homecoming and how it can have broader points to talk about other than like, oh, like good versus evil and the tragedy of the fall is like, oh, like, yeah, Michael Keaton's character like wants to do something and has like ideas and goals beyond like killing the Spider-Man. And so initially it was going to be like, oh, it shouldn't be a grudge match, but knowing that it's after Avengers Infinity War Part 2, where a shitload of people are hopefully going to die. God, I want there to be consequences in these goddamn movies for once. I want somebody
people need to die.
Yeah. I think that there is an interesting avenue there for Peter being sort of emotionally compromised and maybe being reckless in ways and hurtful in ways, and perhaps that motivating Mysterio, because I do know that Mysterio's character in the canon is like that he's obsessed with taking out Spider-Man because he blames him for not having a job again or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's like how the core of the Sinister Six happened, is that they all got put in jail by Spider-Man, or they all been damaged by Spider-Man, so they all want to team up to stop Spider-Man.
Yeah, so you know, like there's a lot of ways that if they do some sort of grudge match thing, I hope that it is because Peter Parker legitimately like fucked up. Like I want Peter Parker to do something bad that no one can like really like justify, and that'd be cool. Spurs, yeah. That would be good.
That's like what triggers everything in, like, it's not that the villain already existed, and it's not that the villain's
it's like Spider-Man himself
because of
created
what Peter actually did.
Yeah, Spider-Man, like something he did, like created the villain. Like it's his fault, and you haven't really
exactly.
I think Electro tried to be that, but it was just not done well.
Yeah, and I think it would also like finally really kind of deliver on him actually screwing up, because Tony likes to scold him and punish him in ways, but like Spider-Man's never actually done the wrong thing in those situations. He's just sort of like done the right thing and pushed up against his limits. No one's really been hurt by that. So I would love to see one of these superheroes like truly fuck up, and he's the perfect character for that because he's a kid, he's inexperienced, he will be emotionally compromised, and also he just hung with the big dogs. Like maybe he's feeling a little reckless in his like emotional damage, you know?
There was a deleted scene from Homecoming where when Peter's in Germany, he puts on the suit that Tony gave him and he just starts swinging around Berlin. Like saving people, hanging out with people. He goes to it's like face cam, parkour, and then he ends up at like a rooftop party and then starts dancing and then takes pictures with them. It's actually pretty funny. But like, I want that. I want that again.
Well, that is the Sinister not the Sinister. Are these? Oh wait, these are not 6 villains because there are multiple villains in some of these movies. So the Sinister 6+ of these Spider-Man films. I think that just about does it for us. We're a little over an hour and a half, so
we covered a lot of stuff today.
Yes, we did. Anthony, where can people find your fun rants on Twitter?
You can find a lot of fun rants. And a lot of fun memes.
Yes,
at the Pizza Taco on Twitter.
Yes. Izzy, where are you on the social media?
I'm at Delirlin on Twitter.
And Thomas, where can people find you on social media and anything you want to plug?
I am at Thomas Loughney on Twitter, Loughney. You can also find me over on the Major Casts Network. I'm on. If you enjoy my leftist sloganeering, you should listen to Media Majors, a podcast that I do with my co-host, where we talk about stories from our preferred interests of major media. I like to talk about the realms of video game and internet culture, and he likes the realm of TV and movies.
Are the gamers going to rise up? Are the gamers going to rise up? Will they rise up?
Frankly, I'm legitimately terrified of what the gamers would do if they organized. Yeah.
Occupy gamers.
I also do a monthly Stephen King podcast breaking down his theatrical adaptations. It's called King Me.
Wow, that's actually pretty cool.
I'm on a it's the world's shortest comedy podcast. It's called We Are Experts, and it's me and my two friends, Eric and Liam. And we pick a topic that we don't know anything about. We riff on what it could possibly be, and then we research it. And it's a lot of fun. You can also find I write about games and such over on a personal website, nakedcriticism.com. If you like reading stuff, you can check it out there. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm
enjoying.
This was
yeah,
awesome.
I'm enjoying all this. These crossovers we're doing. Like I was on King Me, which was a really fun episode.
The most ambitious crossover event.
Yeah,
Super
Eric
cool.
McAdams was on the show, and I was on his Big Time Whoopsies, so that was a good time. Yeah, networking, right? Heyo.
Yep.
Okay, that'll wrap it up. That's episode 28. Goodbye, everyone.
Chris, whoa,
What?
so fast.
What?
You're just
What?
so fast.
What do you want, Tony?
You're just so fast.
Your
I need to
socials.
eat. There's Burger King downstairs for me.
Oh, that is.
But what's
the
your?
king,
Where can people find you, Chris?
The king requires.
You
some
know where you
justice.
can find me. That's Companionizer on Twitter.
All right.
Okay, is that it, everyone? Did I miss anything else? Because we do
Yes.
have some, we got some bigger stuff going on in the future, but we're not just ready to talk about that just yet. Stay tuned.
Wink, wink.
Okay.
Bye.
Anything else?
We bye now? We're leaving? We say
Yes,
bye?
goodbye. Goodbye.
All right, goodbye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Da-da-da-da.